Okay, everybody, we are going to start our webinar. Here at Sales for Life, what we've done is amassed a fantastic panelist. In fact, I think the best people in the sales community to talk about artificial intelligence. And what I'm going to do is, instead of me introducing everybody and hearing me talk, I want to hear from these experts. So we're going to start with Jim. Jim, give us your 30-second elevator pitch and who you are.
Well, Jamie, a lot of people know me from being one of the co-founders for CSO Insights. For 2 decades, we were gathering data on what are the challenges facing salespeople. Now at Sales Mastery, what we're focused on is how do we move into that next transition of sales? And what does that look like? And specifically around AI. So I'm going to be sharing some of the initial findings we're seeing on our studies and invite people to start learning about a new way of engaging customers.
And everybody, you've been reading Jim's research for decades now. Victor, you and I met a few years ago at a conference, both part of the keynoting of a conference. Victor, introduce yourself to everybody.
Little background, originally from Chicago, if anybody cares. I started out in AI back in 1986, 87, when it was more like an expert system, rule-based system. Eventually from engineering, I went into sales. So it's really interesting to see the full circle of where this is coming now, where you see sales and AI coming together, and that's why I wrote the book.
Fantastic. And Chad, you and I are the world's largest Denver Broncos fan. Chad and I have known each other for now half a decade through AAISP, American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. Chad, introduce you and your business.
Yeah, so you see the picture over my shoulder here. That's where I believe that this art of selling is headed. We all need to be able to put on an Iron Man suit. And the challenge is, how do we make sure it doesn't send us into a brick wall, and make sure that the AI works properly? Because at the end of the day, it still comes down to human interactions. And I'm going to share some discoveries of deploying almost 100 customers on AI for sales over the past 12 to 18 months. And really excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And actually, that's a great segue, because Chad talked about the practicality of AI for sales. Think of this webinar as going to be macro to micro, and we're going to start at the macro level with Jim and my panelist team. If we can all turn off our webcams so that we can focus on the presentation. Jim, you are going to be the quarterback, but before we begin, I want to set the tone for the agenda of this particular webinar. What we're going to talk about first through Jim is, what does the data and trends tell us about artificial intelligence for sales? Then we're going to switch to Victor, and he's going to talk about the core benefits and case studies of AI for sales organizations. Then I'm going to tell a real life case study where it was my first exposure about 18 months ago of a global 50 company who is now doing this and what it's done for their business. And then as we go further down into practical examples, Chad's going to talk about how they're actually executing on artificial intelligence. What does it look like? And then we're going to open up the floor for questions. So Jim, the mic is now yours. Talk to us about the trends you're seeing and how you're dedicating all this research to AI.
Well, it's interesting, Jamie, that we keep hearing from people when we're out talking to sales executives and sales professionals. People are making the statement, sales today is harder than ever before. And in fact, Barry and I are flying out to Harvard on May 15th and 16th to sit down with Ben Shapiro, who's chair emeritus of marketing at Harvard, and a couple other professors to talk about that very issue, because they said we're in the same thing, but the question is that a perception or is that a reality? And I think that's a really, really good question. So let me share with you a reality. So if you can click to the next slide for me, Jamie. This was one of the posts I put on LinkedIn last year, and it generated the most views that I had the entire year. I got about 17,000 people took a look at it, because I said, okay, let's go back and take a look at 2012. We're out of the Great Recession, so a stable business environment. And let's take a look at what sales looked like then compared to what it looks like now. And you can see here the trend is going definitely down, going from 63% to 53%. I talked to our colleagues over at CSO Insights. For 2018, it was a little bit of flattening, a little bit of upside. But 63 to 53.8 is going the wrong direction. And when we've done additional research, around the whole AI for sales thing, saying what's driving your interest in that, people are coming back and saying there are external factors that are making sales harder. The buy cycle has changed, the number of people involved in decision-making process has increased, competitive global competition is driving everybody nuts. But there's also internal changes that are coming in. We're moving into new markets. We're coming out with new products and enhancements. And it's just harder for salespeople to keep up. And so there is some definite data that backs up the fact that sales actually is harder today than ever before. But it was interesting because I was sharing this data with one of my old engineers from one of the AI projects I did years ago. And he's currently a data scientist. And so as we were talking about things, he says, well, there's something you're not putting in your equation. You're talking about buyers and sellers. And I said, what am I leaving out? And so if we go to the next slide, Jamie, what he pointed me to was he said, in B2B sales, you got to be thinking about Alibaba. And I'm going, Alibaba? I'm thinking of Alibaba as being Amazon for China. So you go there for your sunglasses, your cell phone, your tennis shoes. And he goes, oh, contraire. Steve points out, he says, take a look at their tagline. Global trade starts here, and they mean all trade. And just like Uber came in and disrupted the taxi cab business, what guys like Alibaba are starting to do is saying you can actually go on their site right now and get information, detailed sales information on buying $1 million or $290,000 piece of mining equipment, a group of $10,000, $40,000 piece solar powered communications towers, a $500,000 blood chemistry analyzer. And so they're utilizing AI to say, hey, why talk to salespeople? Come to Alibaba. We'll have tools that help you clarify your requirements. We'll tell you the top 3 vendors who should be on your short list. We'll give you a robust feature comparison and tell you what pricing is. We'll give you feedback from existing customers, and hey, we'll process the order. So not only is it hard, there's another threat to this thing. What is sales people going to do in order to make sure that they're part of the equation and people don't just go to technology?
And Jim, a quick question. You make a really fantastic point. So if you think about causation of, you've got this giant dip in percentage of sales quota attainment, and you've talked about external factors and internal factors. Where would you say lies the bigger risk? Is it internal, maybe millennials coming in, less formal training, all the issues that could be with the internal factors? Or if you were to bet on a risk factor, would you bet it towards the external factor of buyer changing, market conditions changing, economics changing? What do you think?
I think what we're going to find right now is, I'm a big believer in the golden rule that them with the gold makes the rules. And so clearly buyers have the gold. And so if we're not in a position to really be adding value to what they're doing, why do they want to come to us? And I think that's where we take a look at our traditional ways of training, our traditional uses of CRM, our traditional ways of segmenting marketplaces. If those things were going to work, they'd be working today, and they're not. And I think that's really what's driving this mood now for another approach to things. And that's where I think a lot of people are making the bet on saying, if we're going to increase efficiency and effectiveness, not just 1 or 2%, but dramatically, that's where we're going to have to start taking a look at AI. And on the next slide, what I did was start to take a look at who are all the players in this space. And there are a bunch of people that are making big bets on saying, okay, let's utilize artificial intelligence to generate the next generation of support systems to help telesales people and direct sales people and sales management. And you'll see a lot of well-known companies on this thing, but there are also a bunch of folks down here that are coming up and getting a lot of money from venture capitals to go and build these types of systems. And on the next slide, what I did was started to put all of this into a guide for solution selling. It's about 70 pages. Happy to send it out to all the attendees today to just give you an idea of what's going on there. But what you're going to see is kind of interesting, that there are a lot of people that are trying to blow up processes. It's not how do I do everything 1 or 2% better. It's how do I do things an order of magnitude better. So we actually found examples of a bank that had a 200% increase in lead conversion rates. We found a company out of Australia that cut their sales cycle length by 65%. We've seen numerous cases where people had double-digit increases in win rates. And what's really happening is on the next slide, we're finding that people are not thinking about this in, let's take a look at the day in life of a salesperson. They're moving it up to the bigger thing of what's customer lifecycle management look like. Because there's a whole lot of things that we do to go from customers being blissfully ignorant that we exist in the marketplace to being wild advocates for us, hopefully, in the marketplace. And it's a much more complex job than just saying, let's help organize the sales rep's daily business. So we're seeing people come in and say, how could we go through and do a better job of market segmentation, persona analysis, key account planning? We move into the selling phase. How could we do a comprehensive needs analysis? How do we do individual stakeholder-based education? How do we really configure solutions to a person's needs? And then we move into the closing phase of actually personalizing that configuration, building the ROI, negotiating the deal, and in post-sales, going on and making that whole customer experience things happening. And what we're finding is AI for sales is not a thing, it's a whole bunch of things. When you take a look at that landscape of logos again, there are a whole bunch of people that are attacking pieces of this thing and saying, let's just blow them up. So we're actually doing our first AI for sales study right now. I'll share with you some of the preliminary data on the next slide, where we went out to talk to people and say, are you implementing AI for sales? And we found a group of companies, about 150, that said yes. And we said, what are you doing? What we're seeing is that they're utilizing AI in a bunch of different ways. They're attacking really big problems. Number one problem everybody said for this year, for 2019, was we need to optimize lead generation. Well, AI is focused on that. Another thing that's been driving everybody nuts is forecast accuracy has been dismal for years. Well, AI is addressing that. And different types of tools to go in and help the salesperson more effectively engage with the customer, better tools for salespeople and sales managers so the managers can do a better job at coaching. So there's clearly a ton of technology that's available today. But the key thing is really understanding how do you apply that to solve real world problems. And if we're going to be living in this world where we need to be selling at the speed of change, we can't say, hey, you know what, next January, we got a big issue, but next January we want to do the sales kickoff meeting. Let's address that then. That'd be a really good time to address it. We got to do it now. And that's why I've been really excited about, the work that's being done to kind of help educate the marketplace on it. Victor, I love your book, and I think you've done some great things. But, if there is, my point of view is that there is clearly a reason that we've got to go out and fundamentally find new things to do. So, Victor, why don't you share some of the case studies that I know you've been gathering on how people are actually using AI, not just in theoretical ways, but in real ways today to solve these problems.
Love it. Great transition, Jim. And thank you for the data. I really appreciate that data. If you can go to the next slide, Jamie, I'll just jump right into it. So let's take a look at the state of selling it. I'm going to retread some of the information you've already shared, Jim, but if you can go to the next slide, I think it's interesting just to touch on these. Now, depending on whose study you want to believe, buyers are now 57% in the sales cycle or 90%. And I've seen people say it's lower, it's higher, and I really think it depends statement, which means depending on what market you're in. But the reality is buyers are going online to look for information. So we as salespeople have to be a little smarter. If you can go to the next one. The other thing is, this is your study, your company study, which is now, I just found out, Miller Heiman. Thank you for that, Jim. People are 50%, 53% into as far as achieving or exceeding their quota, or more specifically now 53.8, which that is a flattening out. So that's really interesting. Next slide. And then this I thought was interesting because I come from sales. We all come from sales, but I love looking at behavior. And this is the amount of time being spent on real sales behaviors to actually close deals. And that's not high. Basically, 1/3 of our time is being spent on trying to close deals. So if you can go to the next slide. So if we now look at the market, we now know that, again, salespeople are not hitting or achieving quota. Only 53% of the time are they doing that. Again, customers have more information. I think that makes salespeople more valuable, but that's another topic. And the fact that they're not spending enough activity time trying to generate or close these sales, that could create a problem. So I had an AI moment. If you can go to the next slide, I was in Seoul, Korea, speaking to a large healthcare company, and what they did was fascinating. They have a telecenter where they have, let's say, 100 people. 100 people each have to make 100 calls. And what they did was they recorded the calls, and then what they did is they split the tracks. And so let's say I'm the seller, you're the potential buyer. They would then look at the seller track, analyze it using natural language processing, and look at keywords, phrases, velocity, intonation, and a lot of different variables. And they could determine who warranted a call back or not. Said another way, if I, the operator, called 100 people, and let's say I closed 20 deals, that means I have 80 in my pipeline I don't know what to do with. So I have to think about who should I call next. And most salespeople would have to guess at this, go with the gut reaction. I kind of like that person. Maybe I didn't like that person. And so AI takes the guessing out by using different variables with the machine learning program they had built. They can basically prioritize the leads for the salespeople, in this case, the operator, and again, also divvy them up into high probability of closing versus low probability of closing, let's push it down the road. And that really blew my mind. So when you showed that data, Jim, on lead generation, if I recall the numbers, today they're investing about 10% AI in lead generation, and now they're going to 50%. So I think that's really where a lot of people are focusing in on. And by the way, this healthcare company, if you could just stay on this slide for a second, Jamie, this sales company or this healthcare company saw a 67% lift in their close rate by being able to use AI to actually monitor those conversations. Now, the other thing that was interesting was that the person who was calling, make the call, again, everything was analyzed. And what they did was use a different type of program, AI, to determine whether that salesperson needed training or not based on how they responded to certain questions. So if you look at 5 or 6 lines down on yours, Jim, on your data point, again, you see the investment from, I think, is 10% up to 25% to use AI for sales in order to train salespeople. So I think this is very valuable. If you can go back, Jamie, to where we're at.
Well, and in fact, this in lies a question I was going to ask Jim or yourself, because this is really interesting. So you think about us as sellers, right? Sellers and marketers coming together. What is the most natural problem for us to solve? And you see at the top of the list, lead generation, forecast management, and so forth. But it's an interesting paradox because we not necessarily the best at thinking of human capital or capital allocation to people. You see sales talent management is at the very bottom. So if we were partnering more with the HR function and operations team, I wonder what they would say about us focusing on all these data points of leads and forecast, and to not focusing on the human side of the human capital allocation, because you just said halfway down the thing, this chart is sales training, and all the way down the chart, people aren't investing on their recruitment process. So what talent should or should not be on our team? Onboarding should or should not be on the team, and certain other aspects that could be analyzed to determine are they a good fit on or off our bus. Just Victor, I'd love to know your thoughts. You're the data guy from an engineering perspective. Do you think it's because we as sellers are only analyzing the thing we understand?
I think this is Jim's chart, so I'll let him talk about my data. My gut reaction is that people are looking for ways to invest in AI. And one of the things you ever hear the phrase eat the fish, right? Which means that you're going to take a revenue hit when you invest in AI. So you want to invest in something that's going to give you a quick return on investment and something that's tangible and quantifiable, i.e. lead generation, forecast management. These are numbers. When you move all the way down, we start getting more into the soft skills. Yeah. And that's why I think it's been deprioritized for now. Jim, what do you think?
Well, let me explain one thing. That there are some things out there on how would we make our people better, and that's around the coaching and the training thing. The sales talent management actually is around utilizing AI to go out and find new talent. So traditionally people have been using old diehard assessments based on types of thoughts that came out of the 80s and 90s on how to hire salespeople. What we're finding right now is if you can get AI and you start analyzing win losses and no decisions, you start analyzing what type of activities drive the sales needle, et cetera. You go through and you find out what are attributes of a salesperson who's coachable or not. You can do a much better job of doing an assessment of saying, is this person going to be coming in I'm looking to hire this person. First off, do they fit our corporate culture? Second off, do they have the talent or can they acquire the skills to be successful here? And third is, are they coachable? And I think those are the key things that we want to attract people who not only are successful here, but want to stay here. And I think those are things that are going to be other areas we're going to lighten up, where we just go out and we hire people who have an unfair advantage from day one of being successful here because we've analyzed all the other success factors and we're doing a better job of interviewing and hiring.
Yeah, great point. And Victor, as I fast forward the slides, look at the second bottom one, price management. You told me the story about dynamic pricing, and I don't know if you want to bring that story up, but I'll key into the slide you want. But it's something that the teams are clearly not thinking about yet, as you've experienced dynamic pricing.
Okay, I'm going to go to it. Let me just kind of explain. So once I left the, once I left that healthcare company, I had this epiphany how AI is really impacting sales, which is why I wrote the book Sales Ex Machina, which everybody on this conference call way to copy. And these are the companies I looked at, kind of the ecosystem I studied. Salesforce probably being the one I went most deep on, and IBM Watson being second. Next slide, if you don't mind. And because I'm going to answer your question, Jim, let me pass by this. These are just two different examples of how AI was used, and I want to be respectful of time. So can we just go to the next one? We can talk about this some other time. And by the way, this was an example how AI, machine learning, was used to find pieces of insight. And in this case, UPS found out that by not making left turns, they can save 10 million gallons of fuel a year and actually reduce their insurance and, again, reduce their carbon footprint. And I thought it was interesting because that was actually fed into their system, and boom, there's a piece of insight. Next one. This one everybody's familiar with, right? The story I love here is that I guess the big headline is you got to trust your data. And that's one of the biggest things I think people are going to have to get over, that you really have to learn to trust your data. So when they looked at the data, when Netflix looked at data, they said, you know what, if we can find a director like David Finch, get Kevin Spacey, and we can use a popular show, House of Cards from the UK, guess what, we can create our show. They were so confident in this data, they greenlit 2 seasons of this without seeing a pilot. And I thought that was amazing. That's
wow,
the big
I
emphasis.
did not know that.
Yeah, and so I think that was impressive. Next slide. And then here, I just want to talk about what's really happening in the market. Now, every picture you post, you're able to get all this unstructured data and move it into unstructured data. And by the way, for those listening, the difference simply is, and I'm being simplistic here, think of structured data as rows and columns. Think of unstructured data as movie clips or pictures, and the AI is able to extract information and then put it in a structured format so it can be also analyzed. Next slide. This one gets me excited because now, most people look at video as just video. We put up videos on YouTube, Vimeo, whatever it may be. But now, again, with machine learning, visual recognition, what you're starting to see is now videos they're able to extract data from the video. So no longer should we look at a video as a video. I look at it as a little data container, because it can now look at the transitions, it can now look at the backgrounds, it can now analyze what was said, tag words, and so forth. And all of a sudden, we have so much rich data. So if you think of YouTube, think of that as now a massive container of data that we can now pull from. Next slide. So now to answer your question, Jamie, and again, it looks a little complicated, but just focus on the first and third column here. And these are the ones I emphasize where I think companies who are thinking of using AI can actually just jump into it. The first one was lead scoring, which is kind of the example I talked about, how prioritizing your leads. Also a classification example, which is, what product do you upsell or cross-sell? And we see that a lot on Amazon, right? And then price optimization and discounting. When I was looking at Salesforce.com, they have a CPQ, I'll call it an app that basically looks at the history of all purchases made, and it will come back with 2 things. One, will recommend some insights. In other words, things that maybe should be in the proposal. And I'm talking B2B, large sales. And maybe certain things that should be in the proposal that were common across all deals that were won. And it will also recommend the average discount rate. In other words, if you're going to discount something, where should you be? And what's really interesting is that you can change those discount rates, and you will see in a very dynamic way how the risk of winning or losing actually changes. And I think that's fascinating. The next one, client churn. When will we lose a client? If we're going to lose a client, what can we do preemptively to keep that client? And it's, again, second to last one is deals to focus on. Again, the fact that AI can now allow us to look at dashboards to see what deals are close to closing or what deals need to be focused on, I think that gives managers, I guess, 1, more information, but 2, more reasons to talk to their salespeople about something specific. And so these are the different areas that I see the sales improvements that we can make with AI in the future. The big question I always ask for companies is try to solve one problem and not a lot of problems. So what problem are you trying to solve is the biggest question I often ask when people say, how do I implement AI? My response is, what problem are you trying to solve? So I would, if you go online, if you just search the 9-step framework I created, it really walks you through how you should actually implement AI in a very general way. Next slide. And so this is my big statement, is that, and I'm talking to salespeople right now, we used to see, Jim, you were joking about back in the day, we used databases. Remember Lotus 123, we went to Excel spreadsheets. For those of you who remember Act with your CD, that was our little database. Fast forward, we always saw the CRM as big brother, a way of management actually spying on us. Today, I think that's flipped. Today, we need to shift our paradigm and view the CRM not as big brother, but something that will augment our ability to sell. And the only way that the CRM is going to be powerful enough to sell or help us sell is the amount of data and the quality of data we load it with. So if you're a salesperson listening to this and you're resistant to inputting data into a CRM, you're only hurting yourself. And I believe that is my last slide, Jamie. I tried to hurry it.
I think that's incredible advice, because in an average company, you have a CRM. You typically have a marketing automation platform. You typically, let's say that you are a software company, or somewhere powering your product or service is a back-end database or a back-end database. Now all of a sudden, you've got 3 data points to pull from. As you talked about from a customer churn standpoint, a very simple thing is usage and net promoter score on the customer engagement side. But I am in full agreement that between your sales data and your marketing data, there's so many insights that you could extract. And in fact, that will be the story that I'm going to tell. Now, this is at a practical level. As I said in this webinar, we're going to go further and further down to use cases. 18 months ago, we went a global engagement with a Fortune 50 company. And as we're rolling out modern digital selling, now our job is skills and competency, teaching this to the sellers to be able to create more pipeline. That's our core competency. I got exposed for the very first time on what AI can do to complement modern social selling or modern digital selling. And the result that I'm going to show in a second is this company doubled their lead conversion in a 90-day time frame. And let me show you how they did it. So, and I think what Victor said was incredible. He said, start at the problem. Basically, use structured thinking to say, like, what is the problem and the bet that we're going to take? And that's where they started. They didn't start at the tool level. They started at the problem. And the problem was really simple. They looked at their lead conversion and they said to themselves, there's no way that this could be best in class. There are thousands of sellers, and inside each seller, which is a region, sells into a region and some into a product, these sellers receive thousands of leads per seller per territory. What that does is, and if you think about it, if they were using Outreach.io or SalesLoft, or they were running a playbook that had a cadence of giving equal amount of time and attention to each lead, what would happen? That means you're only scratching the surface on each lead. You're going, 2 miles wide and 1 inch deep. And so the problem they wanted to solve was, I have a bet, and that bet is that not all leads that we're dealing with are created equal. Now, this might sound simple to you on the outside. You might be a chief revenue officer or a VP of field operations watching this right now and saying, yeah, of course, I know this intuitively. The question is, have you ever done anything about it? And so the hypothesis made sense. They felt that there was going to be a Pareto's law inside their leads. But the question is, what was the Pareto's law and what should they focus in on? So here's the analysis. And they believe that there is no only one answer. You see, there is data, and then there is the reality of relationships. So here's what they did. They analyzed thousands of deals and the commonality of lead conversion. They worked backwards. They basically took deals that were won, and they worked backwards amongst thousands of them. And they started to realize there were 2 or 3 or 4 data points that were recurring over and over again, only on the ones that were winning. But then there was this other X factor. And the other X factor, and this is what modern digital sellers understand, is that relationships produce asymmetrical competitive advantages, meaning disproportionately larger competitive advantages. Imagine taking an existing customer of yours and reverse engineering. Who are they connected to? Who are their competition? Where have people come from and joined into new companies? That connectivity of first and second degree relationships hyper accelerates the probability of winning opportunities. So they combined these 2 data points together. So here's the data that came back. The data that came back showed it was actually exactly Pareto's law. 20% of all of their global inbound leads yielded 80% of all of their deals. So now I want you to picture you're the chief revenue officer or you lead a division, and now you need to give recommendations. The first thing was the mindset. They need to have some tough conversations, both with regional vice presidents, frontline sales managers, and then the sales professionals, thousands of them, to say, by the way, we're about to cut 80% of your lead flow out. And imagine being a seller. Your first instinct, because you've been classically trained to pound away on hundreds of leads a day, every single day, 20 business days a year, to you think that's normal. So now you have to change a mindset internally that says, imagine if we only focused on certain accounts. So that was the mindset. Then they had to go to the action, and they had to show the empirical evidence. They had to show what the action plan was. And it was that we're going to focus on what they would call hand raisers. And these hand raisers, that means that the data coming inbound, these are people that are filling in forms properly, that are showing up to meetings, that have certain roles and responsibilities, that are showing these certain, think of this as buying intent. But what they're doing is they're combining it with social data. And what that means is how close in proximity are they? Did they used to work at a previous customer of ours? Do they work at a customer of ours today? Are they a direct competitor to a customer of ours? There's this, think of like 6-7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. This is, are they 1 degree of separation away from our own success stories? And if they meet those two criteria, you combine that data, those are the leads that the sellers are going to double, triple, and quadruple down on. They're going to spend all of their time on this 20% pile. So that meant they were doing account segmentation. They were readdressing the total addressable market. I did account segmentation, and then they had to retrain themselves to focus on the quality conversation and introducing modern digital things like, let's humanize ourselves. Let's have video conversations with those 20%. And so that's the recommendation. And as I said before, the results. Think of just in a 90-day time frame, they doubled their conversion. They doubled their conversion, and at first you might say, yeah, but their volumes went down. No. It didn't matter because the other 80% weren't closing anyways. So all that they did is they took the 20% that would close, and they spend all their time and attention. Now a seller, instead of making a zillion dials a day and spending absolutely no real human effort on a particular lead, they were taking all that time and they were making videos. They were sending personal invites, and they were doing all things to surround that customer to make them feel important, and that doubled conversions. And it was my first exposure to this, and I went, same to what Victor said, mind blown when he was in South Korea. For me, I had that aha moment that I'm a believer, and actually I would love to ask the rest of my panelists. 5 years ago, when I started really diving deep into social selling, a CEO came up to me and he said, social selling, we're in the caveman days. Means like we're literally drawing on walls and we're grunting and groaning, posting stuff. Like there was no rhyme or reason. It was the caveman days. And we are far from the golden age of digital selling yet, but we've evolved. I think in artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're actually in the caveman days. Like we're at the very beginnings of this. Team, I'd love to hear from you. Do you believe that we are in the caveman days and that these simple anecdotes are literally, like, we'll look back at this webinar 3 years from now and laugh at how caveman-like these simple wins are?
Well, Jimmy, you remember Bill Gates, one of Gates' maxims was always, when we have disruptive technology, we overestimate what it's going to do in 2 years and we underestimate what it's going to do in 10. So I think people have been waiting for AI to finally get here, but as they get into it, they really are starting, hey, we really don't know what to do. We're excited, but we don't know what to do with it. So I think that this kind of, reality is kind of setting in, but they're figuring things out. But I think that Bill's right about the 2-year figure. I think he's wrong about the 10, because machine learning is going to be there and it's going to be pervasive, and AI will get better by itself. In addition to what we figure out what to do with it, it will tighten the algorithms. It will get better. I think I think we'll figure it out. We're going to go from caveman days to now a lot faster than we've ever done it ever before because of the machine learning capabilities of AI.
Jamie, I would also echo what Jim just said, and that is, instead of these mini plays like the 2x in conversion in 90 days, there'll be all the plays will be done on the back end of the technology in a playbook. So as a rep, I'll come in and the social proximity will be developed into my software. What I say when the person opens up and my tone of voice, how I say it, when I say it, what do I, I think if you look at InsideSales.com, they've been working at this for the better part of 5 years. And I think for a couple years there, a lot of companies kind of looked at that technology and said, this is a little ahead of its time. And I think that's where the market is now headed, to pull it all together under one playbook, under one roof. So the rep just has to execute their activities.
I agree. I remember when Dave Elkington, this is the CEO of Inside Sales, was showing me that it was going to take in factor like the weather and the time of the day. Like imagine you're placing a call, and based on external factors like the weather and the time of the day and the traffic in the city, it would affect if it dialed into that company or not, because it felt that the person on the other end of the line might be in a better or worse mood based on that day. And I thought, that's crazy. That's bananas. But in fact, that's probably going to come about pretty soon. Yeah.
Hey, Jamie, I think I would use your analogy. I think we're coming out of the cave, but we're squinting in the sunlight. How's that? That's my visual. And we're trying to figure out what the hell is that. I think that's what we're doing.
Fantastic. Well, and now so this is, as I mentioned, that Global 50 company was my first exposure to it, and where you combine what I believe in wholeheartedly is using social data to empower account selection, account planning, and account engagement, but now taking real other data and turning it into a use case. Now, Chad, you're actually in market doing this. So walk us through what's here in 2019.
Yeah, so if you go back to 2018 when we launched the company, we actually launched in December of 2017. The premise was leverage AI and sales acceleration to speed up our ability to go to market, and then leverage humans to have conversations and move the ball down the field, book meetings, and build more pipeline than you ever could before. And for a year, we did that across nearly 100 clients, and it worked like magic. What started to happen is that companies would come to us and say, hey, we'd really like to kind of cut the corner. Can we forego the people part of the process? Because, if you could just do email and digital, social and email selling, then, maybe that'll book all the meetings for us. And it's not as hard as actually talking on the telephone. And so we did a very interesting experiment in Q1 of this year by launching BDR.ai. And the thought experiment was, let's go sign up a bunch of customers that do digital and email only. And what I'm here to report on is the big no smoking sign on this picture. That's the cover of my book. And it's that the human is so important in the equation. Good news for all the salespeople, more important than I may have expected when I set out to launch BDR.ai. So next step forward there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we provide sales acceleration as a service powered by AI. Human in the middle, right, is the most important thing. ScaleX.ai is the company where we've launched almost 100 clients in the last year. Go ahead and click. So the vision is, how do we make people 10 times more effective? And that is using AI to write a better email, AI to help with responses to emails, AI to tell us who to call when you're building the list. So everything that Jim talked about on the top of the slide, that's the most important thing people are focused on. That's what we're trying to solve with our customers. So we've worked with companies from Aviso, who does the forecasting piece of that. If you're not familiar, they help you with AI for forecasting, all the way up to Vonage, where we're helping their team deliver AI for sales through personalized email send and everything in between. Next slide. So this is a typical program. Think about what would it take if I hired an SDR and they do 50 to 75 sales activities per day through a tool like Outreach or SalesLoft. A normal outbound campaign like that, they would deliver about 10 to 12,000 total sales touches in a year at 50 a day. And if you look at Topo and Bridge Group, they're still reporting that most companies are between 50 and 52 touches per day. So they do 10 to 15 dials, they send 30 to 40 emails. Some companies crank the knob on their emails up to 100 to 200 per day. We go at it from a perspective of, let's go deliver 30,000 touches in a quarter. So accelerate the ability to go to market, powered by artificial intelligence and powered by sales acceleration. Regularly, customers see between 50 and 100 meetings. So BillingTree here was a customer that launched with us in the middle of last year, and within a quarter, in a brand new market that they'd never gone into before, 50 meetings showed up on the calendar. That would have taken 3 people an entire year, and they were able to do in a quarter and decide if they wanted to go into that new market. Next slide. When you go to scale, this is what it looks like. So a customer called Instana, who's grown from 300,000 to 3 million, 16 million, all in 3 years. We've been partnered with them from the time they were about $2 to $3 million, and now they're about $15 to $20 million. Well, that's because we were able to help them book 173 meetings in 2 quarters with Fortune 1000, Citibank, Chase, Salesforce.com, lots and lots of companies. And IT buyers, by the way, oh no, they don't pick up their telephone, they don't respond to email, they don't respond to social. Well, it turns out when you drive this level of personalized activity powered by AI, they actually do. So maybe, do you want to open it up to conversation here before I move forward? Does this shock anybody that 2 SDRs using AI can deliver 173 meetings in 2 quarters?
Yeah, is there anything, Chad, that you can share without getting into IP and secret sauce? I think what's amazing is you're balancing, you're not just hammering one medium. And I think where technology had done this in the past is it took a big bet on only one communication medium. But you're showing here that, and I'm a huge believer in omnichannel. Tell us a little bit and what you could reveal. Why you made a bet on multimedia mediums, and 2, what are some of your findings around this? Just anything that you can add here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if I had those active tabs at the top, call activity, email activity, social activity, what you would find, Frank Swain from Instana says it well. He says, look, email and social are the air cover, and talking on the telephone is where you're in hand-to-hand combat. Yep. And the air cover is important because then people see your logo, they see your brand. In some cases, they respond, they book a meeting. The $1 million finding, and I'm going to share with you some actual stats and numbers, but the biggest takeaway in all of this is that you can't devalue the phone. There's such a huge percentage of meetings that get delivered on the phone. And I thought I'd play for you this short clip. Check this out. I hope this comes through on the audio. I'll just play the first 30 seconds. So this is a call that happened on April 23rd by one of my BDRs using a social proximity type of approach. So check this out.
Jordan. Hey, Natasha. Jordan here with Store One. I know I'm an interruption. You're connected on LinkedIn to my boss, Gal Nayor. He asked me to give you a call. Do you have a quick minute? I can tell you why I'm calling. Sure. Great, thanks so much. So we truly believe that we've discovered a breakthrough.
I noticed you are connected to my boss. That sounds an awful lot like the 2x multiplier that Jamie just talked about a few minutes ago. And that's a major, one of the major breakthroughs, I think. And I'll give a shout out, right, to Bruce from Joy AI, who really helped us discover that opportunity. So that's a big one. But the $1 million takeaway, you leverage the phone in addition to email and social.
I love it. Fantastic. And Chad, we've got some kind of screencasts here, and when I flick through them there, it kind of shows progressive conversation. You just tell me when you want me to flick, but tell the team a little bit how this all works.
Yeah, this gives you a really good idea of what the AI can write. So the way that the AI works is that it goes out, it looks at Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and when you're about to send an email, whether you're using our standalone platform, whether you're using Outreach or SalesLoft, we've developed a plugin to those 2 platforms. So when you go and send an email, it's going to look at Rajiv, and it's going to point out something about him that maybe not all the other salespeople would figure out. And normally, according to Topo, this takes an average of 10 to 15 minutes for reps to go figure out how to write that first sentence. The AI takes that 10 minutes and makes it about 10 seconds. It serves up about 10 to 15 different choices. Look at this one. Sarah, I see you know Italian. Awesome. How did you learn it? Next. Congratulations on publishing Working to Learn, Oxygen Fresh, right? We know that by using these types of sentences, you'll get a 2 times open rate and a 2 to 5 times better reply rate. So the value, again, while I hammer this home, the value is you take that 3 to 4 hours of time that these folks are doing building these emails, and you make it down to next to zero. And so the AI writes the email. That means the person can use the time to now talk on the telephone. So that's the magic. If you want to just click through.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, well, this is where the technology's probably progressed. For some of the people on the call today, they might be weary because they might have been part of generation 1, the cyborg generation, where it different fonted it, or it couldn't somehow take their name properly, and it would just say brackets name, like it was being pulled from a dirty database or something like this. What maybe you can give some tips and pointers for teams on whether data cleanliness or whatever it is that has made this become the 2.0 version of where they might be fearful of this kind of technology from years past.
Yeah, well, you have to trust the data. I think back to Victor's comment earlier, it would be impossible for you to go and build this. I mean, nearly impossible. It took my partner 2 to 3 years to develop this technology. To do that with your own ability to go into LinkedIn and copy and paste and put it in an email, that's hard. So it's important to partner with a company who has this type of AI-powered one-click personalization technology to make it work. As far as the data, really all you need is an email for the sender and an email for the receiver, and then the system does the rest of the heavy lifting on the back end. There is some secret sauce in IP that knows how to tie your Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter accounts together so that I know that if I'm sending a note to Jamie at Yahoo and Jamie at Sales for Life, that it knows you're the same person. And
gotcha. And it knows, and it'd be interesting if it knows, Bill's turn to William. There's nothing that I think infuriates the Williams of the world. The Bills of the world. Their street name is Bill, but they've named themselves William, and when they receive something, a message, dear William, they go, oh, okay, this person doesn't really know me. But
well, and that's why we have a human in the loop before we push the send button on these. It's a good idea. Like this case, Dan Schmeda, I've known him. I've spoken with him at events. If I sent him this, congrats on your 6 months. That might be cool, but I wouldn't want to say, how have you liked it? He'd say, dude, I talked to you a month ago. What do you mean, how have I liked it? I might want to change the second sentence there, right? So the AI can get you so far in the process.
That's a great point. And do you want me to keep flicking?
Yeah, you can go through these builds. Yeah. Let's get to the next one after the builds.
Hey, Chad, I just want to add, because I think there's something special about this, that, we take it for granted that, this is really a Kickstarter, right, to a conversation. So that saves you I'll call it the mental energy of having to come up with a Kickstarter. But what's also interesting from a time management standpoint is I was reading a study when it talks about interruption. In other words, if you're focused on something and you're interrupted, it takes somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes to get back to where you were at mentally. And I see this a lot with people who want to write emails. They'll jump on social media and they lose track of what they have to do, and it takes them a while to jump back in. So I think this is amazing because I think there's a bigger time saver here than probably what we're able to quantify. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, that's a great point. I think the mental gymnastics of switching topics is much more taxing than people realize.
Yes. Think about Steve Richard, our friend who's also been part of the AISP for a decade, Exec Vision, CRO, and he says that to move from system 1 to system 2 thinking, that's really the purpose of a cold call interruption. And it's an important factor in an email as well. So getting them to go, oh, like if Matt got this, hey, good to see you're on the board. It's great to see you giving back. He's going to say, Spark, interesting. Let me read the next sentence. Where a lot of times, if you don't have that first 2 sentences, you're just going to delete that email and it's going to go into your spam box. But
tie it all in here.
The learn is authenticity matters. So having lived in this software now for a year, every day I go in, I personally send 50 to 100 of those personalized sentences. Well, there's days where I say, oh man, I've got that webinar coming up with Jamie. I better get through these faster. And I go enter. And now I lose the authenticity because I don't read it. And then I end up sending Matt McDarby on my board a note that says, hey, congrats for being on the board of ScaleX. And he's like, you doofus, why'd you send me that? So, leverage the technology. And I said, don't fly yourself into a wall when you put the Iron Man suit on. And that can be easy to do when you deploy this to multiple people inside of an organization. And then when I get to the last couple slides here, the vision is take a tool that automates the bot-powered communication. Look at tools like Conversica that was covered in the conversation with Victor and in his book, Sales Ex Machina. And there's a few players coming on the market. Hint, hint, we're in dialogues to bring some very interesting technologies to the market ourselves, where it's a two-way communication between the AI. And so now you can let the AI do its thing, right? Send an email, follow up on a download, white paper download, or a web form request, correspond with that person. So now there's 412 people that are engaged in that screenshot right there. Well, guess what? That's where you turn on agent assisted dialing and call those 412 at the time of the email open. So let the bot do the bot work, and then let the people do the people work. But instead of hiring a team, if you go to the next slide, this is exactly what I did at Ring Central, a tale of two teams, if you will. A team getting 2,000 leads a month across 10 reps for inbounds, costing $1 million a year in lead costs and $1 million a year in people cost. But there's leakage. They don't get the message right. They don't call on time. They're out sick, etc. Now look at a team that has the same 2,000 leads, except instead of all rep follow-up, the AI takes on the art of emailing. And when there's referrals, it automatically creates a lead in CRM. And then the two really, really good BDRs who are the best on the phone, I'd rather having 50 to 100 conversations a day than having 10 reps have 5 conversations a day. You clean it up, you create more revenue, and that's what the game is about. It's not about cost savings. That's just an add-on value. It's about revenue enhancement and doubling your conversion rate from lead to op.
This, as we segue into wrapping up, I look at Sales Benchmark Index. Matt Shares, the CEO there, been a great mentor to me. He always talks about capital allocation and how great chief revenue officers, VPs of field operations are actually investors. And if you really think about every dollar you spend, as it could be human capital allocation or sales performance capital allocation. I think that's ultimately what you're saying, Chad, is I think that the average sales leader looks perhaps at the wrong part of the P&L. They might only be thinking about the expenditure or the cost saving, but they're not looking at it as a total investment. And I think that's the part that you're hammering home here. That's fantastic.
Yeah, start with that. Start with the outcomes. And then, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to get a lower cost to deliver the outcomes. That's where the magic happens. So if you go to my last build here, I think there's a Excel slide, and build that out. It says 2, 2, and 10.
Yeah.
This is the secret, right? We measured low, medium, high. How many emails are sent? What's the open rate? What's the positive and negative sentiment? On average, in our digital outreach with BDR AI, we book 2-3 meetings a month from email. We book 2-3 meetings a month from social. That's the pure channel. When you add sales acceleration and talk to more people, right? The air cover's on the top and the trench fighting is happening on the phone. Then we've seen customers get 10, 20, even 30 meetings in a month. The best we did was 44 meetings in a month. And that was Instana with those 178 meetings over the course of three months. But don't forget about the phone. Email and social are excellent. I think you and I talked about it earlier, and it was the accelerant part of the program.
Yeah, no, I think this is fantastic, and we only have a few minutes left, and George, perhaps you can feed us if there's anyone that's put any questions in the question box, and if you want to do that now, put it in the question box or in the chat box. George might feed us up one or two questions here. This was chock-a-block full of IP, market trends, and real-world scenarios. I think that this was really valuable for everybody. And maybe we can go on our webcam as we finish this off. George, was there any particular question that you think that we should address, or recurring question?
Yeah, so just give me a second because they're coming in now. So just give me a second. I just want to read through them. There's a lot of congratulations, stuff like that.
Congratulations for hosting a great webinar.
Great, there you go.
By the way, I want to high five Chad for that great line. Let the bot do the bot work. Let the people do the people work. I don't know why I think that's funny, but it is.
But I think that's an important one. I don't know how many times I was told this as I try to evolve as a CEO. $10 an hour tasks to $10 an hour people. $500 an hour tasks to 500. But that's all. It's just capital allocation, right?
Who should be involved in an AI implementation for sales?
I'm gonna leave it to you guys.
Can you repeat the question?
Are you seeing it kick off? Yeah.
Yeah, so who should be involved in an AI implementation that would impact sales?
Well, one of the things that we've been advocating, getting back again, this whole customer lifecycle management concept, is if you map out all the steps that you go through in customer lifecycle management, in column A of a spreadsheet, and then in columns B on over, you list all the functional areas in your company that are involved in those steps, you start to see that this is really going to be an enterprise related issue, because you're going to have marketing be involved in certain things, the customer support, and down when you're negotiation finance, and then when you're spreading things out, product development and delivery and distribution. So I think it's really the type of thing is, if you're saying that we're going to transform this whole process of customer lifecycle management, it's much bigger than a sales problem. And by the way, it improves everything for everybody. If I can really get the data flowing back and forth, then we're going to make everybody within the enterprise more effective.
Yeah, Jim, I want to piggyback off that. I don't know if it was your study at CSO Insight or somebody else's, but they talked about 10.2 being the average decision makers involved in signing off on a deal. And I'm like, 10.2, how do we go from 6.8 to 10.2 decision makers? And as they moved up the complexity, implementing technology, now even lawyers are involved because of the IP, the data security part. And I thought that was interesting. Talk about really making this complex.
Yeah, I'm involved in one of those right now, and they actually said, let's get the lawyer on the call tomorrow. And the lawyers have already signed off on the entire deal with multiple pieces in it. We've peeled it down to one piece, and the lawyer still wants to get involved and say, hey, this is very important to our future business dealing. So yeah, good.
It's the end of the sales cycle when the lawyer's involved. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right, last question to wrap up the hour is that sounds expensive. Right? So people are like looking at it and go, hey, like this sounds expensive.
I'm going to go
Which
back
I would
to
say from a skill standpoint compared to what?
I want to go down from that 63% to 53%. That's expensive. The cost of doing nothing is killing us right now. And if it's taking a year to get somebody onboarded, forecast accuracy is 47% when the odds of winning at Vegas are 49%. I mean, come on. These are things we're already incurring a huge cost, and the cost of fixing that problem is order of magnitudes less than the cost of doing nothing we're already eating every day.
Yeah,
I think that yield and throughput piece is just a huge one. Yeah.
The other piece,
automation that's out there already, though, I think people don't realize that they had to go out and hire all these data scientists to build some of these algorithms. The cost would be astronomical. The fact that you can apply some of these applications, whether it's ScaleX.ai or some of these other ones, you can jump into it at almost, I don't want to say a smaller non-expense, but it's a way of getting in gently, dipping the toe in the water.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I did 169 dials this morning myself before this meeting. I talked to 7 CMOs and CROs of companies, and the immediate reaction of AI for sales is, well, that sounds like a boil of the ocean. And I say, I tell you what, I'm going to send you a short video after this call that I'll record for you. It'll take me about 60 seconds if you promise to watch it. And I'm going to show you one thing that may have a 2 to 3 times impact on your pipeline. Would you promise me you're going to watch it? And they're like, okay, you got it. And when I send that email, this is a brand new process I invented this morning. They're like, awesome. Yeah, because I can show you something for $1,500 for 3 months and show you a 2 to 3 times impact in pipeline. AI doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Know what your problem you're trying to solve, and then try it. Easy peasy.
Fantastic. Team, we're at the top of the hour. This was a fantastic webinar. Thank you, panelists across the board. I'm looking at my grid here. Thank you for great work. And team, reach out to Victor, Jim, or Chad and/or I on LinkedIn or through their website for more information. And we'll be sending out the supporting recording and all the other assets after. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Very good.
Take care.